Okay, we're just coming to this last section of the longest chapter on repent and renew, and tonight we're going to pick up on page 61. So if you look back on page 59, you'll see that he's taken a very core concept of the Buddha's teaching about the three bodies. That's in the middle of the page, and the Sanskrit for them are the Dharmakaya, Sambhoga Kaya, and Nirmanakaya, which translate different ways, but the Dharma body, the reward or enjoyment body is the second one sometimes, and the third one is translated also as transformed or transforming bodies transformed. Tonight we're going into the last one, the third one, and this is talking about, at one level it's talking about how an enlightened being can manifest or appear or express in different form, in different bodies. And the last one here is the actual, many texts talk about this, how sages, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas will appear in a form that's appropriate to teach and transform, liberate a living being. And of course, the best example of this is probably Guanyin Bodhisattva. And if you read the text on Guanyin, you'll see that there's innumerable kinds of manifestations that this Bodhisattva will take on to teach and transform. Some of them very kind and compassionate and gathering in, and some of them almost terrifying to subdue, depending on what's appropriate to break a habit or a kind of fixation of attachment in a different person. And these bodhisattvas, the texts really go into this quite a bit, especially a text like the Avatamsaka Sutra, where it describes in rich detail the paths of a bodhisattva, not just in this world that we take to be our world or the world in our more narrow sense, but in innumerable kinds of worlds or spheres of reality. And these include heavens, hells, realms of animals, ghosts, spirits, worlds that are coming to being, worlds that are dwelling, worlds that are going bad, and so forth. The Avatamsaka just stretches the mind, even our imagination, to something beyond what we can actually wrap our minds around, which is part of the purpose of the text. It's to stretch us so far that our elasticity breaks and we lose a narrow frame of me and mind that we usually are in. But it takes some pressure for this to happen. And sometimes the pressure of the Avatamsaka is just in the imagery and the metaphors and the examples and the numbers that just goes and uses numbers, expanding till you finally just say, stop, I can't keep up with it. And in some ways, you could say it matches, although it's been done slower, just our basic human understanding in the last millennia, where we've gone from using extensions of our senses, say the microscope and variations of the microscope, and then the telescope and variations of the telescope, including satellites, and what's the one, the Hubble, another example. So in a sense, the world that existed, say, a millennia ago, of my village, my space, and even in the time of the Buddha, there wasn't even a sense among the ordinary population there was anything other than the space within one's walking, talking, listening distance. Tales would come in of reports of other worlds, Marco Polo's, for example, journeys to so on and so forth. But they were kind of like fable or phantasmic. Now, with these extensions of our senses, all of a sudden within a very short period of time, and some people, starting with Freud, point to this as being the blows to our ego. In other words, we move from an Earth-centered universe to one that is seemingly solar-centered. That was a big shift, from geocentric to heliocentric. But now, as we expand out, we can't seem to find the center of a universe. And so you have that happening on one level, and then you have something like maybe Darwin's discoveries, where we thought we were the special species at the top of the pyramid, divinely created and set there. And then you have the natural selection theory, and then the idea of a kind of random thing going on in terms of evolution. So there's a second one, and then you have someone like Freud himself who's saying, so you think you're in charge of your life? Aha! You're driven by these unconscious desires and longings and so forth that really aren't within the purchase of your intellect or your reason. And so in many ways, Freud described this as humankind's ego receiving blows to their idea of me and mine. And what the text of the Avatamsaka does in a much earlier way is does pretty much the same thing. We are in a kind of narrow sphere or frame of reference from which we then see, report, project, and set up another a world that we're in the center. So this is, egocentric, if you want to use helio, geo, ego. And although that gets hit a lot of times, we don't give that one up. I mean, just as, Galileo says, well, the earth moves, well, okay, I'm going to put you under house arrest for a while, But if you do the egocentric thing, nobody challenges it because we each think that we are the center of the universe, and so we can maintain that myth. It is indeed an egocentric, and I am the ego in the center. And this doesn't change from 2 years old up to 70 or 80. It just gets more refined. So what this text is doing, what the Avatamsaka does, is to shake us out of a sense of that narrow scope and move us into realms upon realms upon realms, coexisting simultaneously, each in different phases. And in those realms are living beings of countless variations and forms. And the transformation bodies then are, a sense, the result of intentionality. Now, I want to make clear we understanding about these, because these bodies, and even a Buddha or awakened being, is the result of intentionality. Humans intending, making intentional commitments, vows, resolve to direct and move in a certain direction result in changes, transformations. And they can happen immediately, day to day. They can happen within a decade. They can happen within a lifetime. And from this map of time and space, they extend over and over. So they become sort of like you would say meta-gens. I don't want to say they're genes, but they're meta-genes. They're meta-generating forces that direct us through our existence in day-to-day, life-to-life, and so forth. And this is what is called mind or consciousness. That's the directing. That's the primary determining force or factor in human existence. And so the transformation bodies are basically Buddhas or Bodhisattvas who reach an understanding, a profound understanding and mastery, if you can, over this determining process, and then make vows that are brought to fruition as they can manifest, in this particular one, in different forms, all with the intent of doing what's appropriate to wake up other living beings. And so they manifest throughout these realms. So that's transformation bodies. Now, what we're doing tonight is Hui Neng is coming back and saying, I want to bring this closer to home for all of you, because maybe this is too far out of reach. I want to bring this right back to the human, the existential, the here and now. You are, all of you, he would say right now, directing your transformation bodies. You are, with your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your desires, your intentions, transforming your consciousness, and your consciousness is in transforming your whole mind-body continuum. This is a very, very primal in terms of understanding the mechanism of why you would meditate, is to get a handle on, a vision into, and some grasp on the mechanism that's driving your destiny. And that's within your reach of these exercises. What these spiritual exercises are doing is opening that up, disclosing it, and revealing the workings of cause and effect at this level, which then allow you to consciously, with intentionality, pure intention, to take some control over this and not just be pulled around by unexamined impulses, desires, wants, fears, and so forth. So this text, what he's doing here, he's saying this transformation is the constant. There is only constant transformation. There are no fixed dharmas. Everything is impermanent and flux, but it's not random and chaotic. It's actually driven by intentionality and in consciousness. This is the meaning of everything is made from mind alone. So here, this passage, he brings it down, and that's where we're going to start on the bottom of 61. He says, let's go back. What are the hundreds of thousands of myriad transformed bodies of the Buddha or a Buddha? It doesn't have to be the Buddha. In fact, it's probably not the Buddha. It's a Buddha. If your thoughts do not get caught up in the myriad things, then your nature is basically like empty space. Now, this is a very interesting expression. In other words, what he's saying here is if your thoughts, your feelings, your desires do not get caught up in the myriad things. In other words, they don't attach and cling and set up identity in the passing phenomena, but are within them and watching and moving through their ebb and flow, but don't set up and say, this is me or mine, because when that is done, you actually stop the natural flow of reality. You create an artificial reality that you can't sustain. Anything you attach to or grab, because the nature of things is to constantly change and move on, anything you try to grab and attach to, you can't. But psychologically, you want to and think you are. And that's the source of suffering. That's the source of dissatisfaction, because inevitably it moves and changes, it goes on, whether it's a relationship, a career, a thought, a feeling, a plan, your own body. There's no way you can just say, I'm going to keep this because I really like it, or I'm not going to take this because I really don't like this. I really don't like illness. So I make a vow that I'm not going to get ill. Well, good luck. It doesn't happen. But setting it up in that way creates this tension, which is at the root, what the Buddha said is it's the root of human anxiety or dukkha, stress, dissatisfaction. So when he says here, if you don't get caught up in the myriad things, it doesn't mean you ignore them or you blot them out. You simply watch and work within their rise and fall as they naturally come and go. Then he says your nature is basically like empty space. Now, some people read this as nothingness, and I think we have someone in here, Franklin. Didn't you just do a response to? I heard about this, right? You did a response to what's his name? Steve Colbert. Yeah, Steve Colbert. And it's funny because last night I thought, well, I'll watch this because I don't know what this is about. And last night it was the rerun of that very thing. So I thought, oh, somebody should respond to this, and of course you did. So he responded to Stephen Colbert's the notion of nothingness in Buddhism by, I guess, I haven't read it yet, gently correcting him.
Well, I cited the text actually right here.
Oh.
I think I forgot which one. Which I found it. It was one of the chapters, but basically, Master Hui Neng was kind of demonstrating with his students, saying that.
Oh, okay.
Contemplating stillness is just. Contemplating stillness is actually a sickness, and not,
Mm-hmm.
That's not. It is on. It's just. I'm not. It's not amplifying my noise.
It's going to another realm.
Yeah.
Beyond this room.
Yeah. So I was just saying that would. So that's not what we're doing when we're meditating. Is not to think of nothing. So,
right.
Yeah. So that was what I said. A little thing. Yeah. But what's interesting also is that in our programs, where I think both the graduate students and the undergraduate students at ERBU was reading the life of Buddha Charita, and then one of the exchanges was that when the Buddha was talking to this recluse or a meditator, and deciding what to do next after he left his palace, and so then this very refined cultivator kind of described his state, and it took a while for him to get to it, but eventually he says, at some point I this consciousness, this seer or this knower, sees that there's achieved a state of nothingness. And then the Buddha said, that's very, very good, but that's not quite what I'm looking for. And then he left the guy and went on. That's kind of a riddle. And talk about it.
So to make it short, nothingness is not the goal. Although this sunyata has been translated as nothingness. And it seems to, when we use that word in English, it seems to imply a void, an extinction, an elimination of everything whatsoever. And that would be the highest goal. And even back at the turn of the century, when this was propagated by the early translators, Max Muller started to ask a question. He said, you know, I've been to these countries and I see these really devout Buddhists and they're happy and they're, you know, how could extinction be the summa bona thing that they're after? It doesn't make sense. He says, maybe we mistranslated this. But again, the word is used to mean nothing lacking, nothing absent, everything whole and complete. So the nothingness here refers to a state of whole, complete fullness. This is called the fullness of the nature. It says, return the light illuminated within, seek the fullness of your nature. In other words, reside in that place. So here, it's very interesting. He says, your nature is basically like empty space. Well, empty space is not empty. You see, empty space contains everything, but there's no place that it sets up or stops. You know, so many, in some of the Zen poetry, they compare it to the sun and the moon, moving through space. It's there, it's bright, but it's also nowhere clinging and attached. There's constant movement. And space then has this potential to contain rather than the elimination. So here what empty space means, you're able to enter into the fullness of existence throughout all time and all realms and all things because there's no place you're setting up. Therefore, there's no boundaries or limitations. And therefore, empty space is a container is kind of a, you know, it doesn't work as a word because a container implies there's some boundary. But even here, what empty space is saying, it doesn't even have a boundary. There is no container to this. Unless I'm wrong, I don't think they found a container to the universe as much as they push this. It's always a mystery. They think, you know, they used to think when I look up, I see the container of the universe, and they thought that the stars were like on the ceiling here like lights. And there was a sphere with the stars on it, right? And then they rotated around the earth. That was the first idea. They had no idea that this went beyond one dimension, and that was a ceiling. Like you look at the ceiling, see the lights, you look up and see the stars, and they're all on. You know, I used to have a theater when I was a kid that had little holes in the ceiling. And so when they turned off the lights, you could see all these little lights coming in from the outside. Those were the stars, but they were just on holes in the ceiling. So the ancients thought that the stars were like this, and all of a sudden they go, wait a minute, no, it's, whoa, wow. And it keeps going and going and going, and the dimension of this is containerless. This is what he means here when he says the nature is like empty space. It means its potential is infinite and boundless. It's able to embrace and contain all these things without stopping or attaching. So this is a very positive notion instead of saying it's like empty space, which is empty. It isn't empty. I mean, even the empty space we're talking about is not empty. And this is the reference. But he says it's like. It's a metaphor. He's not saying your nature is empty space, so let's not go there. So he says, but, and here's the passage we do tonight. With a single thought, transformation occurs. In other words, with a single movement of the mind, and by this we mean, again, I want to stress, it's not just abstract thought. In fact, that's probably the least dynamic or powerful of our mental activities. Mostly it's habits, feelings, emotion, desires, and so forth. Is that transformation occurs, therefore, he says, evil thoughts transform into hell beings. Wholesome thoughts transform into divine beings. And we put the Sanskrit here, Naraka and Devas. Viciousness, vicious impulse. You see, when he's going here, you think with thoughts. But now he's going into viciousness, compassion. These are expressions of mental activity. they transform into devas. Vishnu's transforms snakes and dragons. Compassion into bodhisattvas. Wisdom transforms into higher realms. Delusion into lower realms. The transformations of this essential nature are extremely numerous. So it's saying everybody has this full capacity, this full potential that they call the nature. And in the movement of this nature, depending on how it's used and directed, it can move in myriad directions. It can move into a higher human potential capacity that we could manifest. And you can see this right within the human realm. There's a variation from some very, very despicable, almost mind-boggling, negative, evil behavior on the part of humans. Whether you're calling it genocide or whatever, or serial killing, or, I mean, there's just so much stuff. And then you have the other side of incredible creative energy that creates architecturally music, the stuff of Nobel Prizes in literature and so forth, all coming from this same mind, depending on how it's applied and used and nurtured or neglected and so forth. So you can see this is a very powerful thing, human consciousness, human mind. Right within the human realm we can see this. Okay? Now you say you extend this across, and what it's saying here, when they say higher realms, they're saying basically what I referred to in Buddhism is the 10 realms, or the 10 Dharma realms, and these are, you know, hells, the realm of hells, that's Anaraka, animals, ghosts, and spirits, and then you have people, Asuras and Devas, and then you have Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Arhats, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. These comprise the 10 realms. And what's saying is these are not different in kind, but different in degree. It's along a continuum of consciousness. Consciousness unattended to, neglected, abused, and even misdirected leads to these lower realms. And the other occurs with directed towards enlightenment and awakening and so forth. But they're not different in the sense that they are distinct, self-contained, unimpenetrable realms that exist independently. But they are actually a continuum right now within human consciousness. So what it's saying is within our human awareness and our consciousness right now, there is a potential to create movement or direction, intention, meaning tending towards, intending, leaning towards these realms by, he's saying, our consciousness, by the use of our consciousness and our mind. And so the goal here is to take control or to take cognizance of what we're doing consciously, unconsciously, moment to moment, thought to thought, because that intention then leads to these transformations. So he's saying, again, I go back to last week, there's not one creation, there's constant creativity going on, thought to thought, moment to moment. We are in the creative seat. And he's also saying there's ultimate, I guess you'd call this plasticity. I wouldn't even say it's neuroplasticity, but total plasticity, in the sense that there's infinite possibilities with consciousness to move and along and manifest throughout this whole thing. This is pretty interesting stuff. So he's saying they're extremely numerous, and he goes on, he says, now, a deluded person, meaning someone who's not aware of this potential, of this capacity, who's simply going from impulse and desires, day-to-day habits, and so forth, is not reflective, not aware. And it's not like it's mystical, it's sort of like it's obvious. If you sit and listen to yourself, you can see it happening. But if you don't stop and listen, it's easy to think that that is not in your direction, that it's being directed by, or you're not even aware that it's going on because you're just reacting all the time. Life is one continuous set of reactions rather than reflections and then directing. And for a lot of people, this is what he means by deluded. It means unaware. It doesn't mean that they have low IQ or they're stupid. This is not what it's referring to. It's the unawareness. They don't understand this truth, and they continually create evil in thought after thought and go astray. In evil, it means not reflecting on what is the intention, motivation behind this action, where is it tending towards, and what are the results that's going to produce in me, in my relationships, and even in the larger natural world. Because cause and effect works across those three dimensions. And that's why, at the very simplest level, the idea that a negative emotion, let's say anger or jealousy or hatred, leading, which would then lead to viciousness, which would then lead to violence, so forth. In this sense, you're not punished for those, you're punished by those. So that, and the texts are very clear, as you have the anger and the hatred arise, it's not like there's Buddhas and Bodhisattvas out there keeping score and say, oh, you know, so-and-so just got angry and hatred, and they put down a little mark in their book and say, they're going to get it later. Or maybe if I'm in a bad mood, I'll give it to them now. It's like agency is not other than your own consciousness, and therefore that anger and hatred is not, you don't get punished for it, you get punished by it. Your whole state of consciousness twists and distorts and becomes transformed into the object of that thought that you generated. And so you live in a realm of hatred. Now, if you live in the realm of hatred and anger, you can say, what happens? Look at your body. Transformation occurs. Huh? Yes, transformation occurs. You know, at the hormonal level, at the neurotransmitter level, through all the measurements of the subtle biofeedback mechanism we go, there are wave after wave of things going on with that anger and hatred that work throughout the body. And that actually change your face. Okay? And actually, after time, it sort of locks your face and your body into a posture. When you see something, you go, whoa, they are really, whoa. And you can see it. Other people can see it because there's a transformation that occurs. So from that consciousness, from the unleashing of that, becomes a physiological change. You also then release hormones in your system that are wired and fired and triggered to respond like this with fear and hatred and so forth. And you can, you know, you can measure this. You can measure it in the cortisol. If you just want to do one measurement. So you can look at all the biological features and you can do it. And people do this. Say when stress and anxiety comes, your cortisol levels goes up. This is what happens, you know, at various levels of your body and your brain, your neurotransmitters. And you are, in a sense, frying yourself without realizing it. Now, if you've been meditating for a while and you sort of can watch these things rise, when an impulse of anger comes up, it is really like a bomb going off in your system. So pronounced is the juxtaposition, but if you don't have that platform to juxtapose, it becomes habit. And habit then becomes a pattern that becomes a kind of destiny, and before you know it, you are locked into this groove, whether it's lust or anger or jealousy or fear or worry, anxiety, and you find yourself unable to get out because it feels like now this white water river is just pulling you along, but it started with just a couple drops. You know, if you think about these amazing rivers, I was like from the Himalayas, whatever these rivers are, but they stop with just these little drops way at the top someplace. And they just build up with quantity and time to become something like a torrent. So he's saying, due to the person doesn't understand this and goes astray, if they would turn back a single thought to goodness, they would give birth to wisdom. And this is called the transformed body of the Buddha within your essential nature. So it's really interesting what Hui Neng has done here. He hasn't denied the profundity or the possibility at some level beyond our ken right now of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in this actual realm. He doesn't, but he says, I'm going to bring it home to you and say this is where it comes from. The mechanism that produces that is the same mechanism that's going on in your system right now. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas come from the very same machine, if you want to use that language. Some people like to think of it as mechanisms. And so it's saying by using that, we are right in the same ground the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas or hells and animals, depending on how we use the mechanism. So this is really very, very fundamental to the understanding. And so rather than saying, I don't believe in Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and I don't believe they can transform into all these different beings, fine. You know, who cares? If you believe it or not. It's something you will see directly as you move along your own continuum of developing this talent, if you will, or this ability. But you would start with, very existentially start with, what am I doing now, day to day, thought to thought? As I'm in this creative seat working with this mechanism, how am I using this incredible tool? How am I using my consciousness? Where is it going? And so meditation, again, at the beginning, is really not so much looking for higher altered states of consciousness or nothingness, but it's rather using reflection as a mirror to look at what's going on in the inner process that's directing everything and becoming aware and saying, this one leads here, this one will lead there, and actually doing a vetting process of saying, I don't want to go down here. And sometimes you have to reverse engineer. You have to start with full-blown manifestation of an emotion, an affliction, and then go back. Where did that come from? Where did that start? And you take it apart. And sometimes meditation helps you pull it back till you find the earliest turnings of it. You know, so this is really the process, to take it out of the metaphysical and abstract down to the very here and now of our own process, what we're doing day to day, thought to thought, moment to moment. And it should be immediately liberating. Should be immediately liberating, because there's probably no other way to get at this except through one's own attention to this. So I wanted to read to you something, because I think so central to this text, but I would say not only all Buddhist text, but most of the wisdom texts, and I would associate with the South Asian tradition, throughout the South Asian continent, forms of Hinduism, Vedanta, and so on and so forth, up and through all of South and East Asia, whether it's Taoism, Confucianism, Buddhism, whatever you're looking at, all have at their core a very similar concept to this, that we are the makers of our lives and our destiny, that we are in charge and we have the potential to do great harm, great good, to actually become awakened beings. And I have a friend who's a Confucian scholar, a Chinese philosopher, and she maintains that in the Chinese texts themselves, in Chinese philosophy, the heavenly, or the sage, the Shen, is not apart from the human, but rather a perfection of the human. That this is a continuum rather than two different realms. It's not a dualistic realm, but it's actually a continuum. It's a very interesting way of looking at it. So when they talk about the spiritual or the junzi, the superior person, they're talking about a human potential that just once realized enters into naturally this because it's part of the nature to begin with. So there's not something beyond. So let me just quote some passages here. This one I like, excuse my terrible pronunciation, it's from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So this is the Upanishad text, and I'll give you 3 different translations of this. It's really quite wonderful. The first one is, so a thought, so, S-O-W. I have to say that, spell that out, because probably there's no farmers here, so you're like, so meaning so, or so what, or whatever. No, so means to seed. You sow a thought, you reap an act. You sow an act, you reap a habit. You sow a habit, you reap a character. You sow a character, you reap a destiny. And so this particular Upanishad goes on, therefore, if you want to change your destiny, you have to begin at the first thought, because these lead. So you then go back and examine the smallest of things. In the Confucian tradition, which I won't have time to go into tonight, but there's this wonderful passage that says, everything that's manifest in the world comes from our society. Our society comes from our families. Our families come from the individuals who make up the families. That individual begins with you, father, mother, or whatnot. If you want to correct the world, you have to begin with correcting you. To correct you, you have to correct your mind. To correct your mind, you have to go deep into the smallest of places, the first thoughts and inklings. Once you've got that cultivated, everything else then goes out from there. And it says, therefore, the wise person knows that in the end, the beginning has the ends. So in other words, what is closest is also what is distant. If you want to see what's distant, look at what's close, because there's a continuum. It says things have their roots and have their branches. Attending to the roots puts you in control. Attending to the branches means you're always chasing after things. And then it says, therefore you should know, Shoshan Weiban, the cultivation of your mind and person is the root of everything. Now this is Confucianism, it's not even Buddhism, but it's got the same momentum of this. Different translation of that same Upanishad. The thought manifests as word, the word manifests as deed, the deed develops into habit, and habit hardens into character, character hardens into destiny. I like the hardening, because it has that plasticity again, the congealing of something. And this last translation, you are what your deep driving desire is. As your desire is, so is your will, meaning your intention. As your will is, so is your deed. And as your deed, so is your destiny. These are various translations of that one Upanishad. Another passage that I can just share with you, this is from a Theravada, or, people like to use these designations. I don't care for them particularly, but some people say this is Theravada material. This is from the Dhammapada. And actually, this is the first opening of the twin verses. This is the beginning verse of the Dhammapada. And again, I will give you different translations. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought, meaning brought about through the mind. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of an ox. So the ox is the mind, and it moves. As it moves, the wheel follows as the ox goes. You want to control where the wagon goes, you talk to the wheel. Don't do that, of course, you work with the ox, right? And this is a beautiful one in Buddhism, because the ox being the mind, there's these wonderful woodcuts of the ox herder. And the little kid who's trying to tame the wild ox, which is a mind, and it's a beautiful expression, again from another culture, but the most powerful engine of work then was an ox. Now, people don't even know what an ox is. We think it's a jet or something like that, but anyhow. Then it says, a second, mind precedes all mental state. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. If with a pure mind a person speaks and acts, happiness follows him or her like a never-departing shadow. So this is very interesting. They use the shadow and the ox, but they're saying each thought, each movement then results in this. Another translation, experiences are preceded by the mind, led by the mind, produced by the mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows, ox cart. And then the other one, experiences. Now this is interesting. It's saying what we experience, what we take to be our reality, is not what is out there per se, but it is an interactive, constructed thing. Our experiences of any particular event, any particular thing that's going on, is not like, oh, that's out there and I'm experiencing it. But we are, in fact, directors and actors and recipients and observers of this experience. We're the whole kit and caboodle. We're the theater, we're the script, we're the actor, all of that is being made, all those experiences. So experience shifts, not because things out there necessarily shift, but our state of mind shifts. And so things that could be objects of intense desire and passion can quickly turn into turds. I'm sorry to use that expression, but the Buddha actually used it too. And things that are seemingly not interesting, like meditation or something, suddenly can turn into jewels, depending on a shift of consciousness. Mr. or Mrs. Perfect, given some shifts in consciousness, start to turn into, Brad and Angela or something, or vice versa. What happened? Shift in consciousness. Right? And so somebody else will project upon them and say, well, this is, and then shift to consciousness and occurs. So you start to see everything is indeed made from the mind, both in the long-term sense of continuity of cause and effect, but in the immediate sense of awareness. That a shift in awareness shifts perception, that shifts reality. And so you say, well, what is reality? It's a constant shifting interaction between something that is there, but also largely what we're projecting onto it, interpreting it, filtering in and filtering out. Often reality consists of what we don't pay attention to, not necessarily what we pay attention to. So it's very interesting to become aware of this process. This last one is, our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Suffering follows an evil thought as the wheels of a cart. Our life is shaped by the mind. Joy follows a pure thought like a shadow that never leaves. So these are three variations. So we have the Upanishad, we have the Dhammapada. I'll just read you one more, the more that everybody knows from Buddhist text. And some people think, oh, we say this line all the time. It's in Chinese, Rao Ren Yu Liao Zhi San Chu Yi Che Fo. If one wishes to know all Buddhas of the three periods of time, the past, present, or future, contemplate the nature of reality, the Dharma realm, everything is made from mind alone. People think someone put that verse out. It's some master or something, but this is actually from the Avatamsaka Sutra, and it's from a particular chapter that I really like, because the verses in there are really good. It's called the Siyama Heaven Praises chapter. And in that Siyama Heaven Praises chapter, that's where that line appears. And it goes on to say, just like an artist working on a blank tablet with his colors and her colors, pastels and whatnot, creates all these myriad things, so does the mind create da-da-da. And it goes on like a musician and so forth. So it has these wonderful metaphors in there of the creative process of the mind consciousness creating worlds. Here's one I want to read tonight because it's one probably people haven't heard before, but also from the Avatamsaka. And this is describing bodhisattvas who realize what Hui Neng has just pointed out. And it says, if all bodhisattvas are in this way able to make contemplation interact with practice, to make their contemplation interact with practice and their knowledge and their contemplation start to merge so that you're gaining a field of knowledge through contemplation, and your contemplation is informed by this knowledge. It's a very interesting way of looking at learning. I'm learning through meditation. No, I'm not like blanking out and going to nothingness. I'm actually expanding my consciousness through meditation rather than dulling it down. If they do that, if then within all dharmas they do not get rise to a dual understanding, it says. And that the key concept of the Sixth Patriarch is non-dual, that the worldly and world transcending, the human and the divine, are along a continuum. If they don't create that dual understanding and stay in the non-dual, then all Buddha dharmas will quickly manifest before them. At the time of first bringing forth this resolve, this mind, they right then attain perfect enlightenment. They know that all dharmas are just the essential nature. And they're the essential nature of the mind. They accomplish the wisdom body and become enlightened, not because of others, but because of their own effort. So, different passages. I just want to, of course, I read you a Taoist passage last couple weeks ago. Same illustration, the classic of purity and stillness, saying our natural tendency is for purity and stillness, but our thoughts, unchecked, disturb it. Our desires entice it away. We get lost. And the text actually says we stumble and fall face first in the mud. This is right from the text itself. But again, agency is back on us. Our thoughts, our desires, watching them and controlling them in this way. So this passage tonight is really important. I'd say it's really at the heart of Hui Neng's teaching. And the thing about it is it really puts it back into the human and puts it into human psychology. And probably something we all know, but we don't really... I even when I was aware of this, I was really shocked by how coarse and uncultivated I was in working with this mechanism. You know, my thoughts and feelings were shooting all over the place. And I'd gee, look at that. It just went out and caused somebody to be pissed off, you know, way down the road. And I started reflecting even my relationship with my parents, how many things I said or did that just, you know, hit them like a ton of bricks. And I was expressing my individuality, you know. It's like, and I look back on this and say, oh my God, you know, whoa. So this is very accessible. I just want to maybe finish with a story, not about me, but about somebody else. Some time ago, Sure and I were sent to Canada and to open a new monastery called Go Buddha Monastery in Vancouver. It was the old Salvation Army headquarters in downtown Vancouver, right in the heart of the Skid Row area. And there we were, you know, shaven Westerners in robes, setting up a Buddhist monastery. The scene on the street was pretty interesting. What are you? You know, I'm a Buddhist monk. You're a monkey? No, I'm a monk. You got some stuff, man? Yeah, I got, you know, kindness, compassion. So it was a real cutting my teeth on something here. And in any event, we would give talks every day. We didn't really know what we were talking about, but the master encouraged us to give talks every day and to use the sutras to talk rather than just going on and on. So that was where we started to talk and lecture. And some very sincere people came. This one person I remember, very interesting man. He was, I would say, mid-30s, maybe. Really bright, very successful. He was a real estate entrepreneur and doing quite well. But his roots were such that he was drawn to Buddhism and meditation, and he would come all the time and say, I really like the meditation stuff. I really like that Avatamsaka Sutra. And I really want to go deeply into it, but there's one thing that's holding me back. And so I said, well, David, what is it? He said, my tongue. So I thought he was going to say, yeah, I can't stop gossiping and, you know, putting people down and whatnot. He's saying, no, my flavor tongue. I said, well, he says, well, I know really, if I really want to hold the precepts and do this, I have to stop getting stoned and drunk. But it would really be good to stop eating meat, because I realize, that that's a form of harming, and I don't want to do that. He says, but my tongue is so strong, I can't. I really love meat. I said, okay, what are you going to say? I can't say don't love it. So I said, well, just keep at it, keep working. About a year after, doing the lectures and whatnot, he came in one night, he said, I'm ready. I said, what do you mean you're ready? He says, I'm ready to go full whole hog here. He says, oops, that's not what I meant. I'm ready to totally make a shift. I'm going to stop eating meat. And I said, what happened? He said, actually, it was something quite unexpected, and I can't deny it. And then he explained, he said, I started to reduce pork and beef. And he said that was kind of easy because actually my doctor, and if I was reading the research, was saying these things are not so good, especially as a regular diet, for all these various health reasons. Carcinogenic, blood pressure, diabetes, and so. But he said, but seafood? Really love seafood. And he said, so first I would go to the markets and buy it frozen. Buy frozen seafood, shrimp, prawns, whatnot. And he said, and that was pretty good, but he said it wasn't really, after a while, so fresh. And the fresh was where the flavor was. So then he said I would go buy it freshly killed at the market. And he said, I got into that for a while, but then I wanted that next up. So then he said I would actually bring it home alive. So as you all know, if you've ever been to, not Safeway, where it's all packaged. I took my nieces to Safeway. They had no idea what those packages were. I said, well, that was a chicken and that was a cow. Really? And I take them to McDonald's and I go, that was a cow? That little, yeah. And they're going, whoa, wait a minute. The hamburger comes from a cow? Or the pig comes from Babe? Babe is the bacon? Ooh. And then the consciousness shifts, right? So you take them to Safeway and they just see these packages neatly wrapped and, go home and mom cooks it and they don't associate it. Anyhow, at the Chinese markets it's different. Some of you have been to Chinese markets. They have everything swimming around there, especially the seafood, the lobsters, the crab, and the eel, and so on and so forth. It's all there. And so you can go in and get it really fresh and bring it home. And in some places, even restaurants in China I was at, they would say, we can kill it right here for you before we prepare it. And moreover, we can chase it around. We can get it really agitated so the blood's really flowing in the animal. Then we kill it and it's maximum flavor there. And I go, whoa, this is really at some edge. And it's like, so he said, well, I went to the market and I got my favorite, which is eel. You all know what eel is? Who doesn't? Somebody might know what an eel is. It's this long, snake-like aquatic animal, and apparently just cooked right, it's supposed to be. I've never had eel. Where I grew up in Wisconsin, we didn't have eel. And so he said that was his favorite. And so he brought one of these big white buckets, and he got 2 eels and put them in the bucket, and he put them in the back of his Mercedes. And he's driving home, and he can hear them sloshing around in the trunk. So he turns on the music because he doesn't want to hear them sloshing around, trying to get out of the pail. So the boom, he's going home, and he's thinking, eel tonight, fresh eel. Oh, I'm gonna, his mouth is watering. And he gets home, he takes a bucket, he puts it in the kitchen, he gets all his cooking gear, and he's ready to go. And he's got the pot cooking, and he's got all the herbs and spices he wants in there. And he's ready to go for the eel. And then he stumbles and tips the pail over. And the eel goes, flying onto the kitchen floor. So he's got this, really smooth, linoleum plastic floor, and he's got a wonderful hardwood place apartment in Vancouver. And he's going, oh, shit, well. And he tries to grab for the eel, but, slips away, tries to get the animal, and then it goes under the stove, and he's there with a stick trying to get it up. And the eel goes, and he finally he dives on the floor, he's sliding on the water, and the eel goes down the hallway. into the living room. And so he's going around now chasing these two eel. He's got a fork and a knife in his hand, and he's down. He wants to get these eel, and he can smell the herbs are starting to go bad now because they're boiling on the stove. And he's trying to, what am I going to do? I got to get these eel. And then he throws the knife, and he misses it and takes a whole chip out of his beautiful, ebony floor or whatever it is. And he's down there, and finally he just rips his shirt off till he's down to his t-shirt because he's all wet, and he's going and going. And he's chasing these eels, and he turns the corner, and he's got one of those doors that have a full-length mirror on it. And he goes, and the door's there, and he suddenly sees himself in the mirror, down on all fours, with this scowling look on his face, like that. And he said, oh my God, he said, I saw the beast. I saw the animal in me. And he said, it scared the living daylights out of me. I saw where my mind had manifested this desire, this lust that turned me into something on all fours, chasing as a predator, this little fish who was trying to get away from me. And he said, the ugliness and the horror at what I held in my own face there in front of the mirror just paused. He said, I sat there for 5 or 10 minutes going, what have you turned yourself into? What have you become? And he said, at that moment, I realized I had to stop being led by my desire. I wasn't just pursuing my desires, I was possessed by them. And they were turning me into something I did not want to become. And so he said, at that moment, basically, I guess he got the eel, he liberated them. He didn't cook them that night. Where he liberated them, I don't know. But then he came back in and said, really, I want to change. I don't want to become what I saw. I don't want to become what I saw in that mirror. And so I give that as an illustration of sometimes in the process, you can't see where these thoughts or desires go, but if you let them out and you let them run a little, you'll get a reflection. And you may not like what that is, and that allows you to have a change. So here's a very, kind of a practical application for him, but he wasn't convinced until he saw the transformation. How his thought transformed into that, and he didn't like what he saw, and he reversed. But if you follow the text carefully, animals come from human beings who did not reflect in this way. This is part of the teaching. If we don't attend to this and don't map in how we're feeling and whatnot, it becomes a character, becomes a habit, it becomes a destiny, and we actually physiologically, not just consciously, transform into the object of that. So it's a very, very interesting kind of illustration. But we'll stop here for tonight. I promise, we'll finish this chapter next week, I think. Perhaps. Yeah, we'll go into it and then move on. So enough for tonight. Any announcements or?
So tomorrow we have Avatamsaka Sutra lecture, 7:30 p.m. by Reframing. Also tomorrow...
By the way, that's that text I was quoting you tonight. So he's lecturing continuously on this Avatamsaka Sutra. Where are you in the sutra, do you know?
No, yes, we have now 7 grounds, 10 grounds.
Oh, you're in the 10 grounds chapter. There's, by different ways, there's 40 chapters of this. Sometimes people say there's 38, 39, 40. But it's a huge, huge text. And in it are just myriad wonders of tales. So chapter 39, the whole chapter is a epic pilgrimage by this youth called Sudana, who goes in search of enlightenment through 53 different teachers. And so it's really an epic narrative like the Odyssey or the Iliad, but it's on this sense. That's only one chapter. The chapters, I quoted you 2 different chapters tonight. The second quote is from the Brahma Conduct chapter, and the first one was the Suyama Heaven Praises. So if you have a chance and you have the inclination, really look into that text. It's pretty cool. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And also we have tomorrow in the City of 10,000 Buddhas in Ukiah, we'll start 7 days Guanin Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva session. And I don't know that what is the, how we can go there. DRBU website, for you some information about that.
Orientation starts on Saturday evening, but orientation for newcomers starts on Saturday evening. So if you still want to go, let us know. We did close the registration because we have to get you a room and everything. But if you've been there before, you could go on Sunday evening. So just
And it's
talk to me if you're
a
interested.
7-day session. Okay.
Just it.
Okay, we're going to do a transference in English. By the way, transference is also a form of transformation, because what we're doing here with the transference is we're taking intentionality, an intention and of giving goodness out into the larger world, and we're actually transforming that into an energy, hopefully that has not a small effect. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. May we all hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity. May our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ding li san lao.